Hi, my name is Yuvan. And every 2 weeks, I sit down with people from all different backgrounds who have something compelling to share. Lessons, stories, and honest conversations about personal growth. These conversations aren't about finding all the answers or solving the world's problems, but about learning from people who've lived through real moments of loss and change and rebirth. Today, I got to speak to Jonathan Rosenberg, two-time bestselling author of How Google Works and Trillion Dollar Coach. He's been a member of the Google leadership team since 2002, almost the very beginning, and has spent his career studying and practicing concepts like leadership and team building. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you enjoy. This is Lived Words with Yuvan Rase. I want to start talking about success, sort of as a concept. I think there's this funny thing that we have today in the modern world where I could go on my phone, anyone with internet and a phone can go to YouTube and find a million videos about how to be successful in 3 easy steps. And I think we often think about success in this sort of interesting lens of like, how do we become successful quickly, right? You're someone who would be, by all accounts, considered to be incredibly successful by the general public. When you think about success, what does that mean to you?
Well, I think it means that you're happy with where you are in life. And I don't think that it's the kind of thing that people should think about as a race. I think people need to think about it as a journey. I don't think it's something that you can start with a goal that I want to get to whatever your definition of success. I want to make $10 million by age 30 or by age 40. I think you want to define where you want to get in life, what kind of a person you want to become. And at every stage in life, the kind of person that you want to become is different. So one's definition of success in high school is often different than their definition of college. One's definition of success in their career can be different in their first job than in their second job or their third job, or once they have children, or when they have a goal for retirement. So I don't think there's really a clear answer to that question. And I think it's an answer that also changes over people's lifetimes. So I would think about it more as building the skills that you need to get where you think you want to go. But I think you're constantly reevaluating where you think you want to go as you get there.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. Do you feel successful? If you reflect, why?
Well,
not to be,
I have I celebrated my 36th wedding anniversary a couple of weeks ago. I have 2 kids. My son just had a granddaughter on Sunday. Well, he didn't have a granddaughter. I had a granddaughter. He had a daughter. And I no longer work a conventional 80-hour-a-week job. I largely advise and help people who are interested in speaking to me. Thankfully, there is a set of people who feel that way, and I think they joke around. At least the folks that I still talk to at Google say that Jonathan's advice is free, and on some occasions it's worth it. And so awesome. I'm able to do what I want, when I want, where I want, and otherwise, have achieved the goals that I think I would have defined for myself when I was younger. But I don't know if I'll be successful when I'm 70 or 80. Depends what I want to do with my life when I get there.
Yeah, very fair, very fair. Do you feel like there's a moment or a time period or a year or something where you feel like you remember feeling like, okay, now I'm successful for like, yeah. When was that?
That was in 1998. I had left Apple, where I was the director, the eWorld Services, which was a online service based on America Online technology. And I had taken a job for a company called At Home, the At Home network. At Home was focused on building two-way cable modems. So taking a 6 megahertz cable channel and running data through it and getting rid of what you probably didn't grow up with, but it used to be when you wanted to dial up to the internet, you dial up AOL and you'd hear like these sounds with something connecting. And At Home went public, and Mary Meeker was busy publishing her presentations about the future and the internet. I remember the first one. It was "Oil fueled the industrial revolution, bandwidth will fuel the new economy." And I had been reading Mary's presentations and kind of studying where the internet was going to go as broadband evolved. And suddenly I had money because I worked for a company that had gone public, and there were all of these startups in the internet space evolving, trying to take advantage of this new thing called the internet. It was clear that it was going to be big, and I kind of had my choice of which of those things I wanted to follow. So I think that was probably the moment. 1998, I was 37.
Got it. Interesting. Why do you think that today people are so, is that always kind of been a thing where where success we've thought about success as, and you mentioned like success as a journey, and thinking about the journey to success. And I think that, is that always kind of been like people are trying to kind of get to success as fast as possible? Why is that something that is such a prevalent thing today?
Yeah, I think it's prevalent today because, one of the themes that we talk about in my books is that the balance of power has shifted kind of from companies to consumers, and the rate at which technological change is impacting consumers has increased drastically. So the possibility of doing something which entails disproportionate rewards relative to the kind of things that we had that we saw in the past is greater. So that's one factor. The second factor is that as technology changes more quickly, the people who are most adept at leveraging and using that technology tend to be young people. So I think 100 years ago, experience mattered a lot more. And today, exposure and limited experience with new technology and using that technology to do something that usurps the old way of doing things is much more feasible. So, you look at AI today, right? A paralegal could do the work of a lawyer, right? A nurse maybe, or a nurse practitioner can possibly do the job of a more experienced physician, or at least offload an experienced physician from a lot of work. Right. So I think, I don't think people have fundamentally changed, but I think the rate of change in the tools that are necessary to do your job has changed. And that's made it possible to be much more successful at a much younger age. And as people see their colleagues and peers becoming successful faster, they naturally feel like that's something that they'd like for themselves.
Right. Fair. I mean, that definitely makes sense. Is that a technology thing? Is that an evolution of technology where now people are able to become successful faster, or think they're able to become successful faster? Is it like a societal thing?
I think it's both.
Yeah.
So I talked about the kind of technological changes. I think the societal dynamic is more the ubiquity of connectivity and communications and social networks. So it's much easier today to see what your friends, what your colleagues, what your peers are doing. When I got out of school, I remember kind of thinking, okay, well, I'm a year out of school. Where are all my business school buddies a year out of school? And you'd have to call them, and you'd have to ask them, and you'd have to find out. Now you look at Instagram and it looks like everybody's doing better than they really are. And you can see it all, and it's in your face all the time. And so I think that's a pretty profound and significant difference. People project that they're doing better than they are. And all we see now is what they project. And we see what lots of people project all at one time. And that's very different from the world that I grew up in, where you'd have to send somebody a letter. You'd have to go back to a reunion. You'd have to call somebody. I kind of had a sense of what three or four of my business school classmates were doing a year or two out of school.
Right.
And when I talk to my kids, they know what all of their, they know what classmates who they didn't even know are doing.
Yeah.
So I think social networking has also had a pretty profound impact on the dynamics of the way young people see themselves relative to each other.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I feel that as a young person, and that is definitely a pressure. I think that when you're seeing all the things that your peers are doing, what people are like, this person's only 3 years older than me, and they've done this and this, and that's what they posted on whatever social media platform. I'm curious, do you have a thought on how someone can like kind of escape the loop, for lack of a better term? Like, how does someone, because I can't make Instagram go away, right? I think that, and that's kind of, it just exists, that these platforms exist. How does a young person navigate those waters and not get into this kind of psychological of like, oh my God, this person's so much more successful than me. They're doing
Look, I
better.
think it's the same, it's the same dynamic that we have with almost any kind of technology. I think humans are a little bit like those experiments where we used to give rats drugs. I think the one that I remember was cocaine, and the rats would just keep taking more of the cocaine until they became drug addicts and killed themselves. And, I'm sure there's articles on kind of the dopamine hits that rats experience, if that was particularly the chemical that works in their brains. I don't know if rats are the same as us.
Yeah.
But I remember when I was a kid, my father, who was a professor, would insist that for every hour we watched TV, we had to spend 2 hours reading. And he was a good dad, so he'd check and see if you did your reading. And, he sort of the trust but verify. He'd ask you to tell him what you read, and then he'd ask you to tell him about it. And invariably he'd read it, so you couldn't cheat. And I think when you look at what's happened with technology today, it's like the experience that I had with my father, but even more compelling, right? I mean, I could watch Wide World of Disney and 60 Minutes and 3 other things. We had ABC, CBS, and NBC. Now we have not only social networks, but we have platforms like TikTok that will continually feed you the next best thing relative to the previous thing that you watched at. And I think that's irresistible. So you need an artificial rule, right? You need somebody like my father that says, okay, well, for every hour you want to spend on social networking, you need to spend an hour reading. You need to spend an hour writing. You need to spend an hour writing and not feeding what you're writing into AI to do it for you. So I think really the only answer there is limiting the amount of time that you spend with these platforms. And I think the other thing that's really hard is every time you see something on one of those platforms, you have to take it with a grain of salt. You have to trust but verify. You have to realize that what you're looking at may not really be what it seems to be. And, that I think that's very, very hard because again, we're like rats seeking our dopamine hits.
Yeah.
And for most of us, this social networking, Instagram, Facebook, Google Plus, which we don't have anymore, but other types of social networks, even YouTube, is too much of a good thing. And too much of a good thing becomes a terrible thing.
Yeah, for sure. Is that maybe like a support systems thing in a sense? Because I feel like it's hard to set rules like that for yourself. Because it's always like, well, yeah, 1 hour and then I'll do an hour of reading, but 1 hour becomes, oh, it's one more and one more. Is there an element of like having a support system, having someone like your...
Well, I know your parents.
Yeah.
Are good parents.
For sure.
If they could set rules and you would adhere to them, your life would be better.
Sure.
And I'm sure if you went off of the rails, they would.
Yeah.
So I think some of that can come from external forces, but I think some of that also has to come from ourselves, right? We have to try things, see what works for us, and then set goals and demand more of ourselves. And, put your phone down, put your computer away, open up a traditional book or a Kindle and stick yourself in a chair and stick with it. And, that's hard.
Yeah. I mean, the reading thing is so interesting. I grew up reading. I didn't have a phone or really a device for a long time. I grew up reading books. I used to read a ton. I still read. I've now have more things going on in my life and more things to do, and it's become less of a something that I focus on. I'm trying to focus more on it again because I used to love reading. But there's so many of my peers, so many people around me, I hear like, oh, reading is boring. I don't want to sit there and do the same thing. And there isn't that, you mentioned dopamine hit, like there isn't that quick, like, oh, swipe and see the next thing and see the next thing and see the next thing. It's like you have to sit and process and think, and it's kind of slow, right? Because it's not a video, you have to actually do something. And I think that's hard, right? It's hard when we've trained ourselves to look at things quickly and be really fast in our thinking.
Yeah.
And so many people I hear, it's like, oh, reading is so boring. It's like, I wonder
reading,
why.
memorizing your times tables is boring. Okay. But, and I remember when calculators came out, people were saying, well, now people don't need to memorize their times tables. And, the analogy to today is, well, AI can write for you, therefore you don't need to write.
Yeah.
That's completely wrong. Memorizing your times tables teaches you how to learn. And learning how to learn is really the main thing you can do to prevent AI from taking over the opportunities that you hope to be able to do yourself. Because again, AI is going to get better so fast that you're going to have to be a complement to AI. And the process of learning how to learn, which you learn in your times tables, which you learn when you first are taught how to structure an essay, in high school, or when you go to college and you find out that you thought the teacher in high school really taught you how to write essays, but now you need to write them better. Those are all tasks that you need to go through to be able to understand what changing technologies will do for the next shift. And if you're not a person who's learned how to learn, you're a person who's just kind of taken the easy, reactive way of engaging, sitting around watching YouTube videos, the next technology is going to come and you're not going to have the ability to think through what you need to do to complement that technology to have a marketable skill. And I think doing hard things is what positions you to be successful as the world changes, not spending more time doing the things that are the most fun that the new technologies enable.
Right. Could I almost say that learning times tables isn't as much about actually knowing the timetables as it is learning how to learn the times tables?
100%. And let's just take an example of, doing math in your head, right?
Yeah.
There are a lot of people, if you say, what's 99 and 43, right? They're going to get a calculator out. But if you've actually spent time doing math and realizing that 99 is one less than 100, right? It's something that's much easier for you, right?
Yeah.
Well, life is all about tricks that make learning new things and thinking things through easier for you. And learning your times tables is something where, different people have different ways of learning and memorizing things, but, they might only learn the squares of things. So they know 8 times 8 is 64. So if somebody says, what's 8 times 9, they know to add 8 to 64, right? Well, again, that's teaching yourself how to learn. And you taught yourself by going through this process of learning your times tables, right? You didn't learn your times tables. You learned what was hard for you in that process and how to make it easier for you and how to create tricks so that you would be able to be more effective at learning and memorizing them. Yeah. And those tricks are the kind of things that are going to apply to life, right? You're going to learn to memorize a face, to use somebody's name, to pay attention when somebody tells you their name, to remember 1 or 2 things that you talked about so that you can establish a rapport the next time you see them. all of those skills are skills that you develop better if you've rigorously learned to learn against some objective, right? And it doesn't have to be times tables. It could be memorizing poetry. It could be memorizing a religious text. It can be, memorizing, the letter that your father wrote to your mother that you found in a drawer, right? Doesn't matter what it is. What matters is that you go through the intellectual process of understanding how you think and of building new pathways in your own brain to think, so that as something new comes up, you've got a strategy for attacking it.
Right. Right. It's funny because you said 99 has 43 and I immediately went, how do I do that? And then he said it's one less than 100, and that totally makes sense. So maybe I have to come do my times tables again. But yeah, I mean, that's a great example because it's such a simple thing. Everybody knows 100 times 43 is 430. And then from there, that's, fairly easy math. But try to do 99 times 43 is 9 times 3, and then 9 times 4, and then you have to add 90 times 3, and it gets a lot more complicated. So it's the little tricks, I think, of knowing taking what you already know and have memorized, and the simple things, right? Times 100 is fairly simple. I said 430, and that's wrong. It's that's funny. That's times 10. It's the simple things that I think, in using what we know that's simple and applying that to a complex problem, right? Or a semi-complex problem like 99 times 43, that gets you an answer, right? And it's that kind of application of things that we already know. And like you said, it's you don't know how to apply those concepts until you've applied them, and you've thought about how to apply them, and then it becomes easier to apply them differently in different contexts because you know how to do it to some level. Absolutely. I want to talk about, is it the coffee room paper? Did I get that right? I heard from a friend that you wrote a paper about coffee rooms, and I think understanding how people act when no one is looking. Could you talk a little bit about what that is?
Sure. So, and this is my sort of just clean up the kitchen example.
Sure.
If you see somebody in your company going to the kitchen and spill something and clean it up, that tells you something about them. If you go into the kitchen and you see somebody and something has been spilled by somebody earlier and the person cleans it up, that tells you something about them. Mm-hmm. If you see them spill something and leave and not clean it up, that tells you something about them. And I think one of the most telling things about people is how they behave when nobody's looking.
Right.
And you learn more from somebody when you see how they behave when they don't think you're looking and they don't think anybody knows what they're doing than you do when they know everybody's watching. And so, I think, one of the things Eric Schmidt would always say is that, employees are always watching. Everybody's watching everything that you do. And most of the time as a manager, they're all watching and they know that you're watching, but it's much more, you get much more of a tell into who they are when you see them in a situation where it's obvious what you're supposed to do and you do it or you don't do it. Right. I mean, I can't tell you how many neighborhood next door articles there are and comments there are on, why don't people pick up their dog's poop, or why do people leave their dog's poop bags behind? And if I were to rewrite this theorem today, I would write it as an explanation for why people leave their dog poop bags on the trail. And these are not good people, but they start the hike, their dog poops, and they are afraid somebody might be watching. So they take the poop and they put it in the bag. And then they say to themselves, well, I'm going to leave the bag here because anyone who sees me leave the bag here is going to know that I picked it up and assume that I'm going to pick it up. I picked up the poop. They're going to assume I'm going to pick up the bag when I return from my hike. Well, when you're returning from your hike, going past the bag, nobody's looking at you thinking, is he going to pick up that poop? That must be his poop. And so then people don't pick it up.
Yeah.
Right. So that's my new version of my kitchen question, of my kitchen cleaning question would be the dog poop question.
Right.
And every time you see dog poop on a trail, you know that unless the person is halfway down the trail and coming back, and that's usually not the case, and there's usually more bags of poop than there are people that you're going to pass, you
Absolutely.
know, you run into that.
Yeah. That's so interesting. I didn't even think about it from that lens, because you kind of avoid all the blame.
Well, you and I would do the world a lot of good if this spread around and people understood that Jonathan's theorem about dog poop and bags explained the behavior. You know, we wouldn't have a post on every next door neighborhood thread in the world wondering why people do this. I had just explained why people do it.
Yeah.
And they're not good people.
Yeah. I mean, it's such an interesting thing, because it's this kind of avoidance of blame, right? Where it's like, I'm free of all blame because, like you said, when I'm walking back, no one will think that I should pick up that poop because someone else must have left it, right? It's not, there's no association.
I'm not sure that you left it, right?
Yeah. So I don't know if you know this. I'm in Napa right now on a gap year program for basketball. I'm playing basketball here, and I'm applying this thinking, because one of the things that happens in a lot of athletics and sports teams is that people will, when the coach is looking, everyone's running really hard and doing all the drills super as much as they can, and the coach turns around and looks at the other group, and everyone's kind of, oh, whatever, and slacking off because no one's watching them, right? There isn't this like, okay, am I making sure you're doing it right? And you see the people who don't kind of have that shift, who keep the intensity high, who keep the work high, and there's almost this unconscious respect for that person, acknowledgement of that person's effort. I think it makes you, like, as an individual, someone as the watcher, it makes you want to try, because like, if that person is trying, then we should all be trying, because that's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
Right. But it's an interesting thing, because you kind of make this judgment about the person of like, that must be a good person because they're working hard.
It's interesting that you brought up that example. One of the observations that we have in my $1 Trillion Coach book, Bill Campbell used to say that he would always look around the room to see who cheers for their peers' success. So he'd look around the staff meeting and he'd say to himself, Joe cheered when Sally gave her report about how successful she was.
Right.
And Bill's view would be, of course, that was a tell to him that, that Joe was a good person. Now, of course, once you explain that to people, and you explain that that's what you're looking for, then they cheer, right? Yeah. So, I think all of these things are useful and good theorems, but once people know what management is looking for, they'll pander to it. I think the other observation that I think is interesting about basketball and sports and cheating the coach is when coaches say you're only cheating yourself. That's true in sports. Mm-hmm. It's not entirely true in other things. If you cheat and your cheating gets you into a school or a job, what you did was wrong and unfair, but maybe it didn't hurt you, right? Mm. Particularly if you get away with it.
Right.
But if you cheat in working out, you really are only cheating yourself, right?
Yeah.
That's going to manifest as, you can only do 20 push-ups, not 25 push-ups. And on the basketball court, you're going to be tired and the person that you're guarding is not.
Right.
And so that one of the reasons that sports is so important for people, and I think team sports is so important for people as they grow and as they then move into the corporate world, is they understand what it means to be part of a team, and they understand that cheating yourself really adversely impacts you. It doesn't help you.
Yeah. Yeah. Why do you think people do that? Like, is it that, because it feels like someone would know that everyone kind of knows that you're supposed to pick up the dog poop, right? And take the bag with you. Like, it's not like, oh, I didn't know that. We all kind of know, but yet we don't do it. And I'm curious as to like what your take is on why don't we do it? Is it just like, oh, we're lazy? If we just don't feel like it?
People are selfish shits. Yeah.
Mm.
Or those people are.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no other explanation, right? You came back, it's your dog poop. You're not picking it up because you don't want to carry it because it smells to the garbage, even though it is your responsibility.
Mm.
So, you're just a bad person.
Got it.
You just have no qualms about adversely impacting the environment, society, and other people for the benefit of not having to do something small that is modestly unpleasant. Carry your poop out.
Right. Do you think there's an aspect of maybe people don't want to feel like, do you think people forget? Frankly, I guess is the first possibility. And then do you think maybe people don't want it to look like they're picking up someone else's poop because that's kind of
I don't. Well,
okay. Is there an overthinking aspect to this? You know what I mean?
It's definitely a very different kind of person who comes down trails and picks up other people's poop bags to clean up the trail. Okay.
Yeah.
That's a very good person. That's a better person than I am. Okay. I don't think there are a lot of, I don't know a lot of people who do that. I certainly applaud them if they do. Do I think it's plausible that now and then somebody's taking a hike and forgets? Sure. But the majority of it is exactly what I'm suggesting. People don't want to be canceled and seen as leaving something and accused of something because that's uncomfortable. But then when they come back, they're not going to be accused because the same people that saw them go up the trail aren't there when they go down the trail. So, I think it's a conscious thing. Majority of people know that they're doing something bad and getting away with it. Just like people litter. It's another form of littering. It's just kind of more gross.
Right. Fair. Does that, in your mind, is that something that to judge a person off of?
Of course.
Okay.
I guess somewhere maybe I've written, don't be judgmental of people. Don't be overly judgmental of people. And I think that's a fair statement. Give people the benefit of the doubt. I might even be prepared to say that in our dog poop example, not to overuse it, but somebody might have an emergency and have to go run in the other direction. So if somebody does that, I can't prove that they're terrible, but 99% of them are.
Okay. That's fair, I suppose. I want to go back to the idea of what people do outside when people are not looking, right? When there isn't this kind of pressure. And you mentioned Troy, our coach, and Bill Campbell had when he would write down when someone cheered for someone else, right? And I think it's such an interesting thing because when you tell someone that, in my experience has been, well, I didn't know I was supposed to do that, right? I didn't know that was an expectation. I didn't know that mattered. I didn't even think about it. I don't think about it when people cheer for me. Like that becomes the kind of almost a defensive response of like, I didn't know. I didn't think about it, right? I didn't think about it. Does that make them a bad person because they didn't think about it? What is it? What is that? Right?
No, look, I think there are people that do, I think what Bill was looking for was the people that do all of these good things naturally, right? And you don't have to do all of these things to be a good person.
Right.
And you may not understand that there are people in the world who watch for these kind of things, right? But as a general rule, I think there are things people do that are indicative of their being good people, and there are things that are indicative of them not being good people, right? Somebody who gossips all the time, or
Mm.
says bad things about somebody else, right?
Mhm.
I mean,
Yeah.
maybe you grew up in a house where where you didn't have someone tell you not to do that, right?
Yeah.
But you ought to have the sense not to do that, or realize that it'd be better if you didn't do that. So
Sure.
I think there are lots of tells that there are lots of reveals that people have, and 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 some people I think are more cognizant of how to project themselves to the world than others, and some people will spend most of their time trying to project that there's something that they're not, right? Like I remember years ago, I would get emails from a certain person at 10 o'clock at night every night. And he was leaving emails in his draft folder and scheduling them to go out at night so that his management thought that he was working hard at night.
Got
And of course, it became obvious to me because one day I noticed that they were always coming at a certain hour, right? So
Yeah.
not only was he manipulative, he wasn't smart enough to be manipulative and, throw a random element into it. And so, I think that you can see that some people understand how to manipulate the dynamics of what others think about them and what they're trying to project. And some people don't think about that at all, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't mean you're a bad person if you don't think about it at all. It just means that some of those people go through life and don't get noticed because even though they're generally doing good, they're not doing good in a way that they make obvious to the people that matter.
Right. Right. How do you create a culture in a team, on an organization, in a group where, because I think there's three kinds of people that we've talked about in the sense of there's the person who is naturally, doing these things, right? Naturally applauding for their teammates, naturally cleaning up someone else's coffee spill, naturally, right? They didn't think about it, just did it. There's the person who doesn't know that they're supposed to do that. Didn't think about it. It's not that there's no negative thing. They just didn't think about it. Saw it, assumed that it was someone else's. Didn't think that they should applaud. Just didn't come to mind. And then there's the person who you just mentioned as like the person that you had worked with, who knows that they're supposed to do it, and so they find ways to do it without actually really doing it, right? And to make themselves appear better,
Yep.
but maybe not be as honest or as candid under the surface.
Well, look, you call those people out and you make it clear that they've been caught. And you can make it clear that they've been caught in a one-on-one environment. You can make it clear that they've been caught in front of a group. I think most people I'd give the benefit of the doubt and not call them out in front of the group initially, but just call them out directly. And if they did it again, I'd be more likely to call them out in front of the group. I think peer pressure in these kind of situations can help. Mm-hmm. And I think modeling the right behavior is the best thing that leaders and managers can do. And I think modeling the right behavior in small groups and in small crowded environments is more likely than not to get others to see what your expectations are and what the right behavior is. So one reason I'm not a big fan of working from home is that I think people do better in environments that are crowded. People do better in environments where they're interacting with each other. People do better in environments where they see good examples and they see bad examples and people call out the bad examples.
Correct. Fair. I mean, does that in some way connect maybe to what I was saying about when you see someone else doing it, right? With the basketball analogy where you see someone else really still working on it, there's this idea of like, oh, I should do that too. Is that kind of
yeah, and I think it works in both positive and negative ways, right? Mm-hmm. I think when people see others doing things the right way, they're more likely to do them the right way. And when people see others doing things that they know are wrong, it somehow makes it okay for them to do things that are wrong.
Right.
If you watch any episode of a riot, it always starts with two groups on either side yelling at each other. and it doesn't look like things are going to explode. And then one person throws something, and then the other side throws something back. And then one person on the side that threw things realized, oh, somebody else threw something. Maybe I can do it too, right? And the whole thing just devolves with one individual doing something that's just a little worse than the worst thing that was previously done.
Yeah.
And 10 minutes later, people are throwing punches, and 10 minutes later, people are hitting each other with baseball bats. And 10 minutes later, somebody goes and gets a gun, right? That's just kind of the way people dynamics often play out.
Right. I think there's that idea, like you just mentioned, where it's just a little bit worse than the worst thing that someone's done up to that point. It's a small
Most things like that are incremental, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about imposter syndrome. So I went to Phillips Exeter Academy for high school, and it was an environment where I think a lot of people have this imposter syndrome. I had it. I know friends who've had it. I know classmates who had it, and they felt like they didn't belong, like that they shouldn't have been there, that someone else deserved their spot, that they weren't the right person for this, that this was the wrong place for them. And it took time and effort and understanding for me to figure out, actually, really, this is a place where I am able to be successful and thrive. And I suppose I'm curious, have you ever felt imposter syndrome?
No.
Okay. Interesting. Okay. That's not the answer I expected. Why? Why not?
Wow. I don't know. Maybe I need to start some deep therapy sessions to give you a good answer to this. I grew up on college campuses, in a family of academics. And the ways in which we were measured were grades, test scores, and they were objective. And relative to my peers and siblings, I did well at those things. And so I think I always realized that I was lucky, and that, I grew up in a reasonably privileged environment, and that I had parents that very much emphasized academics and school and hard work. So I think I always felt like I had kind of the attributes that were necessary to be successful, and that I combined that with being born in the right place, being born at the right time, being in Silicon Valley. I've never worked more than a 5-mile radius from where I am here in my home in my entire career. And I was very lucky. So I don't necessarily feel like I ended up deserving all of the things that I received, but I didn't feel like, and I met people who were much better than I am at many things, right? The founders of the companies that I worked for, or the leaders in the companies that started the companies that I worked for, Steve Jobs or Milo Medin or Larry or Sergey, were clearly a lot smarter than I was, but I was as good at the things, the function that I needed to perform in those environments as most of the other people, most of the other alternatives. So
Right.
I didn't feel like an imposter. I felt lucky.
Right.
And I think as I've observed people in sports, if you take your kind of basketball camp or your basketball experience, I think anybody who's honest with themselves in sports knows exactly where they stand. I mean, are you a senior?
Gap year, actually.
Oh, you're gap year.
I
Okay.
graduated last spring.
So look, exactly how good a basketball player has to be a scholarship candidate at one of the top 10 basketball schools in the country. And you just know in your heart whether or not you're one of those people.
Yep.
You know how good you need to be to get a scholarship at any other secondary or tertiary Division I school. And you know how good you need to be to succeed at a Division III school.
Yep.
And And those are all tiers that are palpable to somebody who has played ball on a high school team or on a club team. And you might be off in your own assessment of whether or not you're a Division I person who belongs at Indiana or Gonzaga or or one of the lesser, Division I schools. But
Right.
But if you believe you're one of those people, it's pretty unlikely that you're one of the people who can't play basketball at any college, right? Or vice versa. So I
Sure.
think for the most part, one of the nice things about sports is it largely equalizes the whole dynamics with imposter syndrome, because it becomes palpably clear where you stand.
Got it. I mean, I think that's very fair. In terms of, I think it's a good example, because I think that outside of sports, it's a little bit more complicated sometimes, right? Where we're assessing people, and just to go back to what you were talking about earlier in terms of social media and what we see about our peers, what we see about the people around us. There's this idea that like, oh, that person is doing better than me, is better than me.
Yeah.
Right? Because that's what you're seeing is all the positives, all the great things that they've done, and not any of the things that are.
Well, and there are also worse dynamics in corporate environments. You have managers who don't have large raise pools and who need to make sort of allocations in a zero-sum game of who on their team is going to get what.
Yep.
And if you're one of the people who I'm not treating as well as I would like, I have to say something negative about you, or provide some kind of constructive criticism to justify my decision.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think what often happens there is kind of the signal to noise of what people hear about themselves is not always consistent and accurate relative to how they performed. And so I think you do have an element of kind of imposter syndrome there. I think the other thing that's unfortunate is that aggressive kind of bravado and self-confidence is largely correlated with success in corporations in America and in politics.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the people who aren't as thoughtful and don't have the grit and don't have the capabilities of it and aren't as aggressive don't do as well because they're not as good at self-promotion.
Right.
And so they then kind of develop these feelings as an imposter because they're not getting where they would like to get. And they're not getting where they would like to get, not because they're not good enough at what they do, but they're not good enough at playing the game. And unfortunately, that's just kind of a pervasive dynamic. The world likes, the world likes aggressive, boastful, handsome, beautiful, tall, people. And some people are, better at self-representation than others.
Right. Do you feel like you are good at self-promotion, self-representation?
Yes.
Do you feel like that has allowed you to kind of maximize your talent, resources?
Yes, I think relative to people, relative to the other product managers and people who did the kind of function that I did 20 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
I think I was significantly better than average at doing the job, but much better than average at representing how good a job I was doing.
Got it. Is that something that someone can get better at? Like, were you always good at that? Is that something that you kind of just are naturally good at? Is it something that, like, if you're not good at that, can you improve? Can you become better at self-promotion? Should you become better at self-promotion?
I think everyone should be better at self-promotion because self-promotion gets rewarded in the corporate world.
Right.
Just like hard negotiating gets rewarded, just like demanding the ball in basketball, telling the coach that you want to play, telling your teammates that you want the ball, right? And you can't score if you don't get the ball.
Yep.
So, I do think that that's a skill that people need to develop. And I think they need to, it's hard to trade off because you're also told, be humble and don't be so demanding. And people will get signals that they shouldn't promote themselves. But if you look at the most successful people in the world, generally they do. It's true of that. There aren't that many basketball players like Andrew Wiggins. Okay. Andrew Wiggins, I would say, is a great example of someone who's all-star level at pro basketball, but wouldn't give the same answer about how great he was as LeBron James or Kobe Bryant or Magic or Larry Bird, right? He would be he'd be more humble. And there's a lot of positive things to say about being humble. On the other hand, bragging and being self-promotional is correlated with success.
Right. How does someone get better at that? Is it just like
watch other people? Yeah. Same way you get better at free throws, practice.
Yeah.
Watch other people and listen to what they do and then try to do those things yourself. And if you're very timid at doing those things, do them in a safe environment. Do them in your bathroom, looking at the mirror, right? Then do it with your friends. Then do it at work with your colleagues, then with your management chain. So practice.
Right. Absolutely. I want to talk a little bit just for a moment we've talked about the business. We've talked about people. Can we talk a little bit about you as a person?
Sure.
What does Jonathan Rosenberg do for fun?
Well, this morning I played pickleball. I watch sports.
Okay.
I hang out with my dog. I like traveling. I like walking around in unfamiliar big cities. So, any big American city or European city, leaving a hotel room and just going in one direction until I can't walk anymore and jumping in an Uber and coming back. I like discovering new things on my own as opposed to through my phone or, through a guidebook.
Right.
I like eating.
Great.
And helping people.
Helping people. Okay. What does that mean?
Well, I think at this stage in my life, it's mostly career advice, advising people who are trying to move from one position to another or try to figure out what they want to do next. And applying my experience in my career to the challenges that they have and trying to help them think through decisions. Should I stay at my company? Should I go to another company? Should I go to this startup? Should I go create something on my own? How do I kind of identify my skills, my competitive advantage, and develop a plan based on it? And Yogi Berra was right. If you don't know where you're going, you just might get there. So everyone needs a plan.
That's awesome. I end every interview with the same question, theme of the podcast. What are some words you choose to live by and why?
Grit, stick-to-itiveness, and lifelong learning. So, I think grit and stick-to-itiveness sort of go together. But I think one of the things that has surprised me, and there's a book by Carol Dweck, The Growth Mindset, that really talks a lot up, and there's other podcasts that talk about this, Malcolm Gladwell and others. But in reality, most of us who live here, who went to, who go to a good high school, go to a good college, have good opportunities, the correlation between success and just working hard and sticking to your plan and applying yourself have a stronger explanatory power than anything else. You know, an extra 20 IQ points is helpful. But it's, you know, it's grit and hard work that matter the most. And, you know, beyond that, I grew up in an academic house and kind of, you know, whatever, every day you should learn something. Every interaction that you have with people, you should learn something, right? You know, I'm learning from you what a person your age thinks other people your age are important, right? You know, so I'll leave this podcast having learned something, by thinking about the questions that you asked me. And, I think most people, most curious people, most passionate people, you know, are lifelong learners. So that would be my answer. And my father, who passed away 10 years ago, would probably like this answer.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Mr. Rosenberg. This has been a fantastic interview. I really appreciate you making the time.
Good luck with your basketball.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Take care. Bye.